On October 11th, 1914, the day after he celebrated his 74th birthday, John George Kootenai Brown saddled his horse and rode 15 miles through Waterton Lakes National Park. As fish and game ranger for the park, he felt obligated to make a daily patrol, even though his health was crumbling. His obligation was not so much to the federal government that employed him, but to his own intense conviction that nothing, least of all advancing years, can stop a stubborn man. Kootenai Brown was fighting old age and the sickbed with the same audacity he had shown as a frontier mail rider, Indian fighter, hunter, lawman, prospector, and conservationist. The woodlands, lakes, and mountains of southwestern Alberta were not his natural habitat. He was a transplant, an Irish intellectual who retained his passion for literature but rejected many other things he had acquired in his early years, including an Irish accent, a reserved, gentlemanly manner, and a love of the British Army.
No, it was my uncle's idea, actually. Yeah. Join the army, he said. You'll have more fun with a cat in a canary's cage. My grandmother agreed with him, but for a different reason. See, she'd raised me. Both my parents had died. She knew what a hell of a time I'd have if I stayed in Ireland. All the potato crops had failed. If the famine didn't get you, the fever would. And damn it, we didn't have enough money. Oh, yes, we got money to live with, you know, but not enough to purchase a commission. The British Army in those days was a very democratic institution. Anybody could become an officer. Anybody, that is, who had money enough to pay for the privilege of being one. Oh, it's the sons of the wealthy who stepped into the good positions, the boys from Cambridge and Oxford and Eton and Harrow. And the sons of the poor, like me, John George Brown, we were foot soldiers. Well, Granny wouldn't hear of me being a common soldier, so she wrote to the military secretary and she told him that she wanted me to have a commission without a purchase. She said that our family had a long history of military experience, that her own late husband had been a veteran with 21 years experience, and so on and so on and so forth. And after a few days, back came the reply: we regret that it is not our custom to commission officers without purchase. And what they really meant to say was that we regret it's not our custom to have worthless Irish ruffians mixed with our well-bred British boys. Our purified waters mustn't be polluted. Granny kept on writing letters. She wouldn't give up. You know, that's a family characteristic, I think, that stood me in damn good stead over the years. Well, anyhow, believe it or not, in the autumn of 57 it was, when I was 17, the British government surrendered to Granny's postal tax, and I was assigned the rank of ensign in the 8th Regiment of Foot, the lowest commissioned position in existence. And that didn't worry me. Oh, sir. Oh, I knew that an ensign can see just as much action as a major or a captain, and a hell of a lot more than a colonel will be stationed so far behind the front lines that he might as well be in Buckingham Palace. It wasn't Granny's letters alone, though, that earned me that commission. There was the troubles in India at that time. You see, in 56, 57, the Indian troops serving in the army out there staged a mutiny. It's a bloody business. Thousands of lives lost. Reinforcements were sent out, including my regiment. By the time we arrived, which was 58, the rebellion was over. Most of the rebels had been shot or were in prison or were hiding in basements somewhere. There was no glory to be gained in India, that was certain. The only active service I ever saw was whirling around the ballroom floor with the old-maid daughters of British army officers and merchants. That took courage, but of a different sort. No, the whole of my experience in India was a bore. I wasn't for me. My life, I thought then, would be a series of episodes. Each one self-contained. Each one satisfying. So when I reached a grand old age, I could examine each episode individually and say, my God, Brown, it's been an incredible time.
In 1861, Kootenay's regiment was back in England. In November of that year, he left the Army, sold his commission, and used the money to buy passage aboard a transatlantic steamer. He was going to the Crown Colony of British Columbia, to the Fraser and Cariboo goldfields where the British papers said fortunes were being scooped up from the rivers and creek beds. The papers called it the New El Dorado, but it wasn't just the gold that lured Kootenay. He was searching for another kind of El Dorado, a place where a man might find himself.
Gaily bedight, a gallant knight in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, cried he, where can it be? Where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow. Ride, boldly ride, the shade replied. Do you seek for El Dorado? Well, 15 miles today. Not bad considering I don't feel well. It's nothing serious, mind you. No tubercular lungs or anything like that. No, it's my old bones. They don't move around the way they're supposed to. Sometimes I swear to God that it's going to fall apart on me. Drop down in a heap. Had enough, they'll say. How much abuse do you think a body could take? Oh, well, you want to hear about my ailments. Guess what you want to hear about is all the money I made in the Cariboo. When I arrived there, I was broke. When I left 2 years later, I had 50 cents in my pocket, and I was in rags. So I came to the prairies. Yes, the plains of southern Alberta. Northwest Territory it was called in those days. Blackfoot country. You know, in all that land, from the Red River to the Rocky Mountains, there wasn't a town or a city, just trading posts. But the Blood and the Sarcee and the Cree had their encampments all over the plains. And the Blackfoot. Now, to them, southern Alberta was their personal toy, and nobody else could play with it. I remember once, we were at Seven Persons Creek. I don't know if you know where that is. It's actually near Medicine Hat today. One of the two fellows I was with said, I don't like this camping ground. It's alive with rattlesnakes. I'll be grumpy in the morning if I've been shaking rattlers off my blankets all night. So I I said, okay, well, let's have a bite to eat first, though. So we moved into a grove of cottonwoods, I remember, and we were just getting our food out of the saddlebags when, zing! An arrow hit the tree beside me. Then, zing, zing, three more. So I grabbed my rifle. I dodged behind the tree. Blackfoot, 30 young warriors on ponies, yelling like hell, riding down the embankment. But didn't have any guns, fortunately. We did. We had muzzle loaders, ball and cap, black powder, plenty of ammunition, so we kept them from running in among the trees. Oh, I guess it lasted about 20 minutes. We killed 2 of them, and one of us was wounded. It was me. And I got a 2.5-inch arrowhead right in my back, right here. One of the fellows pulled it out. He didn't have any medicine, so he poured in 1/2 ounce of turpentine right into the open wound, and I screamed so loud that Blackfoot must have been frightened away, because I never came back. It's a strange thing, you know. All my youth, I used to dream about the glories of battle. And here I was, my first Indian fight, and I was scared stiff. Of course, they say that fear is the measure of a man. I don't know. I somehow think that there's no true victory gained in overcoming situations where you're not frightened. The real triumph comes in facing up to something which makes you shudder to your very soul. Anyway, that's the way I felt when I left the prairies in 1867. I was telling you about Fort Stevenson. That's where I married Olive. She was a beauty. Slim, dark, and 80. I was 30 and a bachelor. I wanted a woman to darn my socks, I'll tell you. Métis were half French, half Indian. I don't know which half is responsible for their wild natures, but they were just like me, born rovers. Hated the idea of a sedentary life. Well, Olive couldn't share my interest in literature. She couldn't read or write. But she could do things that I couldn't do. She knew things I didn't know, Métis things, like how to skin a buffalo. I don't suppose that's of much interest to people today. Well, you know, the lady of the house can go along to a store and buy any meat she wants to. But to the Métis, the buffalo meant survival. Yes, they not only ate the meat, but they used the hides for clothing, the bones for their tools, even the horns for their drinking cups. Métis woman's prestige in the tribe was determined by the number of buffaloes she could prepare in a day. 1 or 2 was the average, but a good wife could do up to 3 or 4. Well, Olive didn't like it in Fort Stevenson. She wanted to be back with her own people hunting the buffalo. She didn't say anything. Not until I said I thought we should move along. It was in the autumn of 1875. And we headed north up into southern Alberta, and we joined up with a band of Métis. The next 3 years were exciting, I'll tell you. You see, the Métis excelled in riding the buffalo. Yes. Horns clashing, buffalo bellowing, rifles cracking, men shouting. The whole world seems to go into a wild, mad, dazzling rush when the Métis charge into a buffalo herd. Sometimes the riders would go down and a man would be killed or hurt, trampled to death by the buffalo. Sometimes, too, a man would be hurt by his own gun. So we used loose ammunition, black powder, ball and cap. The bullets would be in your mouth and in your pockets, and the powder would be in the horn. You would pour the powder into the barrel of the musket and roll the ball inside, and you had to do all that while you're riding at full gallop with 600-700-pound buffalo panicking all around you, and sometimes a man would blow his hand off. Well, that's the way it was in those days. Great days they were. And then all the buffalo went. One summer, the plains were dark with them. And the next year, you search for weeks before you found a scrawny few. Well, I decided at this point to part company with the Métis. They didn't seem to understand the idea that the herds were dwindling. So I left them and came with Olive up here to Waterton. It's right here we built our first cabin down by Lower Waterton Lake. In the winter I'd go wolfing, and in the summer I'd go off into the Rocky Mountains, and there I'd hunt for food, and I'd fish the lakes for trout. After a while I got a new job. That was taking investors on fishing and hunting trips through these lakes, and it paid well. Olive and I decided to go on a shopping spree to Fort McLeod. She'd seen a pretty lace shawl in the store there that she wanted. Even after she got sick, she talked about it. What it would look like. How it would feel. She died. I buried her near the cabin on the lake shore. Let's talk about something else. I came here to Waterton. I've been afraid of the day when the white man and his so-called civilization would destroy this place. Thank God, in 1895, the federal government set aside a small part of it for Forest Reserve. And then, a few years later, an oil company moved into this valley here, just a few miles from where my cabin is. They dragged their drill rig and their machinery over that mountain, right down to this creek here. And they put up their refinery, their bunkhouses, and their 10-story hotel, and they called it Oil City. Oil City. The very words made my blood boil. I could see the day when every tree in this valley would be uprooted to make way for their damn refinery and their bunkhouses and their hotels and their drill rigs. So I wrote to every politician in the land about the possibility of extending the Forest Reserve, about conserving Waterton for unborn generations. People told me I was crazy. Can't fight progress, Kootenai, they said. Well, I'd fought Indians and I'd fought whites, and the so-called progress could be battled just as well. Fortunately, I didn't have to do all the fighting, though. No. Accidents, mechanical breakdowns, and inexperienced workers prevented those Oil City people from producing more than a barrel a day. So they went bust. They pulled out. Oh, 1910 they made me forest ranger of the whole reserve, and that pleased me. What could please me more than what the government gave me last July? Gave me and gave Canada. Waterton Lakes National Park. 423 square miles. Oh, there'd be no drill rigs now. No industry. No cities. Some say I can die now that I've won my last battle. I'm not the sort of fellow who just lie down and expire. I bought myself a typewriter and I'm learning how to type. And I subscribe to newspapers from London and Winnipeg and San Francisco. I know more about world affairs than most people do in Alberta. I can still snowshoe. And this month, either on horseback or on foot, I'll do over 200 miles. Old age. That's the last battle. Nobody's ever won it. God, I'm going to try.